Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Journo Links, the podcast that tells the stories of people who tell stories. My name is Conor O'Brien and I'm a journalist. I run Courageous Nerd, an entertainment and pop culture platform featuring interviews with actors, writers, filmmakers, and all sorts of people. Joining me today as the first guest on Journo Links is the lovely Joe Bambridge. Joe, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, man. It's great to be here. I feel very honored that you've invited me on as the first guest. So yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, for sure. And I'm sure as the conversation goes along, people will kind of learn about your background. I mean, the bits I know, it sounds very interesting. But I suppose kind of like on that note, could you maybe give like a brief snapshot or insight into like who is Joe? Kind of like set it up, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. Well, at the time of speaking, I'm my title is Deputy Editor for UK Tech and Trade at Politico. But I'm still kind of getting used to that title because it's a fairly new gig, and I've only really made the leap into journalism quite recently. Um, I guess kind of before that, I've been in living in London for about 10 years, and uh, part of that was uni. So I did my uni here in London, both undergrad and masters, and I studied kind of uh, politics and kind of adjacent things. And so I always thought my kind of future was in politics, and I had a few different jobs like in and around like the Westminster bubble, which eventually led me to the Treasury, where I became a civil servant. Uh, and yeah, so I had kind of more of a policy background up until quite recently.
Hmm.
And yeah, and then as you know, I kind of had a kind of change of heart and decided to do my NCTJ and make
Yeah.
the leap into journalism.
Well, yeah, and actually that's a perfect segue because for anyone who might be watching or listening, Joe and I met doing our NCTJ course. We had a lovely 6 months, great group of people, in London. It was a really great time. But I suppose like what I mean, you've already kind of inferred or implied this a little bit, but like what kind of led you to the course? Like what made you have that change of direction?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something that's kind of, to be honest, I struggle to articulate sometimes. But
Hmm.
I think it was essentially just a kind of combination of things. I think part of it was just that it's been something that I've always been interested in, and I, kind of during COVID and lockdown and stuff, a lot of people were going through the process of like reevaluating their careers and what they wanted out of life and stuff. So I think part of it was that. Part of it was just like, uh, natural curiosity. I've always like enjoyed, when I was working on policy, I always like enjoyed the policy areas that I was working on, but uh, you are kind of tied into certain kind of narrow fields like for quite a while. And so I think I like the idea of being able to kind of pursue things that I was interested in without having to kind of like wait 6 months or 12 months or 18 months for like a new job, or like for someone's permission basically. um and yeah, I think like also kind of I grew up like living in different places. As I said, I moved to London for uni, but I grew up in Belgium and spent most of my upbringing there. I also lived in a few other countries. And so I was never really sure where I kind of wanted my career to be long term. And I thought journalism, you don't necessarily get lots of money from it, but
Mm.
you at least get like opportunities to sometimes move around and take different jobs and stuff like that. And that just seems super cool. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
for
But
sure.
then I thought I needed like to kind of do that leap. I needed to kind of get some foundations first. And hence why I kind of took the plunge to do the course.
Hmm. Absolutely, and I suppose kind of like a fun novelty, because I can't imagine that everyone I'll end up speaking to on this podcast will have, or obviously, would have done the course. But a fun thing of us having done it together, I thought would be maybe to talk about our first impressions of each other. Back because obviously it was a few months ago when it first happened. So, I suppose maybe I could go first and see whether your first memory matches up with what I remember, as a fun thing. But I remember you came in a day later than most of us. I think you told me later that it was a family member's wedding or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, my sister's wedding. Yeah.
That was it. Yeah. So you came in a day later, and I remember specifically because our course leader brought you up to me. I think I was maybe the first one in that day, and basically said, "Oh, this is Joseph. Could you kind of look after him? It's his first day." And
Yeah.
obviously the fact that that statement was said, it seems ridiculous now because you just went straight flying after that. Like you were like top of the class. You were like the guy. I think pretty much. You were you killed it. Like you did fantastic. But yeah, the first memory was it being introduced to you and being
Yeah.
told, oh yeah, look after him, and then basically finding out, no, like he didn't need my help at all. Like he was fine. It was all good.
Yeah, I think I was I don't know, I just had no idea what to expect. Like, I read about the course and you know had uh, spoken to the course leader before it kind of started, but otherwise, I didn't really know what like other people's backgrounds were going to be. I didn't know how old people were going to be.
Mm,
Um, what experience they might have had. I thought everyone was going to be like, have probably written for their uni paper and
mm.
doing this all their lives and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, definitely pretty nervous. But yeah, I think meeting you and meeting everyone kind of quickly settled me down. And yeah, I don't know about, being off to a flying start or any of that.
It
But
seemed like it from an outsider's perspective, but I mean,
yeah, I just kind
yeah.
of like, I, I don't know, I kind of like leaned into it. And
Mm.
yeah, I think it was fun. I don't know. What do you think of the course overall? You enjoy
Yeah,
it?
well, yeah, I did actually, and I do agree with what you're saying, and I would actually emphasize this to anyone who might be, watching or listening, who is considering it, because there was such a wide breadth of people who did it, age, background. So I would like, not be put off if you are worried about any of those things. Obviously, our youngest course mate was 19. I think the oldest person was in their 30s. I mean, that's a really obviously broad spectrum, really different backgrounds, and yeah, it was just a really interesting experience, I think, for all of us, as I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I was quite surprised actually at the range of people's backgrounds and stuff. And yeah, it kind of definitely reassured me that I wasn't completely crazy for having made this like leap of faith and
Mm,
to try to be a journalist. Um, I assumed like, oh, who would be crazy enough to leave a stable, steady job to
mm.
like go into journalism, especially at like this time. Um, but yeah, I think everyone was just like united by a kind of sense of curiosity and like this being something that they just always wanted to do.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, as it turns out, a couple of you were in that similar position where you had what I would call anyway quite good jobs, and I think maybe a few of you were kind of like questioning your judgment of being like, what am I thinking? But I guess in a good way, kind of like taking this leap of faith. So having now gone through that experience, is it something that, I mean, would you be kind of an advocate for saying like if you feel like journalism is for you, like would you say go for it, or would you like advise caution? Like what would be your kind of rule of thumb, or like what would you tell those people?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I definitely wouldn't discourage anyone from doing it if they feel like it's uh, what they really want to do, and like if they feel like they have a calling, then like uh, yeah, you should definitely do it. And the question should be, how to do it rather than whether or not to do it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's just saying that is important to be like clear sighted and know what you're getting into. So I, did a fair bit of research going into it, but at the same time, I almost feel like I have gotten a little bit lucky in the sense of kind of coming out of the course with a job in the time that I have. And it is a type of job that people do out of like a kind of passion, or because they're super curious people or whatever it is, rather than something that's going to give you a steady job with a really good income and stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think like you are making trade-offs if you're leaving a job to get into journalism. But yeah, I mean, it if you kind of do your homework and you kind of have like a rough idea of a plan, then I would definitely go for it. And I think doing the course, doing an NCTJ course or something similar is really worth it, because I think even if you have experience in other kinds of jobs, it really helps to like meet people going through the same thing as you are and getting into the industry at the same time.
Mm.
um, because it's very hard to crack, I think, by yourself. You might be a good writer and stuff, but if you don't really know people in the industry and you don't really have like a community of people to bounce ideas off and like share experiences and share tips and stuff,
Mm.
it can feel quite kind of hard to kind of see your way into it. So
Yeah, no, I mean it is very much, at least at the start, kind of who you know. Unfortunately, that is, it's just the nature of the industry. And yeah, I think kind of that maybe that might be a good entry into a question, because obviously you mentioned want to do the course for some foundations. Obviously, there's the qualification at the end of it. That's an obvious thing. But was making connections another incentive to do it? Would you say, just to kind of have your foot in the door and know people within the journalism industry?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was definitely a huge part of it, because I don't really know anyone, from my previous life. I didn't really know anyone who was a journalist at that time.
Mm.
Um, like I had kind of one very tenuous family friend, but that was basically it. Um, and so I think doing the course, I felt like I would meet people uh, both in the industry and trying to get into the industry, as in you and the other people on the course.
Mm.
Um, and I think, yeah, it's really important to like not be going through something by yourself, because like you probably just go mad. Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, that was definitely a huge part of it. I think the other thing was also just um, having the kind of like infrastructure and discipline of uh, that the course provides, in the sense that like, you know, well, as you know, like we had assignments and stuff like that, but even like above and beyond that, it's kind of like, all right, I've kind of paid to do this course. I've got this amount of time.
Mm.
Um, I want to have at least some kind of idea of a job prospect by the end of it.
Yeah.
And that almost like forces you to like knuckle down and like take this seriously. Because I think if I almost didn't have that like built-in pressure, I don't know if I would have ever gotten around to actually kind of pursuing this seriously.
Yeah.
It might have always just kind of remained a bit of like a vague kind of
Mm.
ambition. But
Notion. Yeah, kind of thing.
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And obviously you mentioned your job. It was just, as you mentioned, very recent as of when we're doing this recording. But I suppose maybe as best as you can, could you describe like your day to day? Like what does that entail like in this new role?
Yeah, man. I feel like I've gotten super lucky in the role that I've ended up in, because it seems to almost kind of be the perfect kind of marriage of experience that I had before, uh and what we learned in the journalism course. So like
Mm.
uh yeah, I work at Politico, and for people that aren't familiar with Politico's kind of business model, Politico is a kind of news publication that's very targeted at people working in politics and policy.
Hmm.
So you're writing on kind of current events, but in a way that's for a kind of audience that is already quite familiar with the subject matter. And there are also people who like want and rely upon like being in the know.
Hmm.
Um, so essentially, what what that means in practice is like Politico basically has three types of content. So they do alerts throughout the day on like key developments, whether it's like, a vote on a piece of legislation or, a major announcement. And those are quite like short pieces, like 200 words, I say, like those
Hmm.
uh, are turned around really quickly. Then we do like longer pieces that are uh, often made free to read. So like they're kind of put on the other side of the paywall. And that's really just to kind of draw an audience and like draw attention to our journalism and kind of like, keep Politico's name uh, relevant in people's heads. But then the third thing that like Politico's really kind of like become known for is these newsletters,
Hmm.
um, which are like land in people's inboxes at 7 a.m. and they're kind of uh, well, like they'll be broken down by theme. So you pay to subscribe to, in my case, like UK tech policy newsletter, and that is like a newsletter that basically sets people up for the day ahead.
Hmm.
So we kind of say, what are the big things happening? What are people that, the movers and shakers in this news area, like what are they uh, thinking about today? We try to kind of like set the agenda basically. Uh, and yeah, sorry, that's very long-winded, but basically
No worries.
what
No
I
worries.
do is I'm a kind of editor, so I edit the newsletters and the kind of both shorter and longer articles, um, and also help kind of like shape our forward coverage. So like, work with the team to come up with like story ideas, and particularly for the newsletters, like making sure that we always have a plan for the next day's newsletter that's going to be like really sharp and really like forward looking. And that is where like having my kind of policy background is actually quite
Hmm.
useful. Um, at somewhere like Politico, because we're writing for like policymakers and I have a kind of understanding of what that process is like. Um, that's been quite useful. Um, and then uh, in certain cases, I also write stories myself. So I've done a few kind of alerts, have done bits for the newsletter around things I pursued. And that's why I said it's kind of like the perfect role, because it's like
Hmm.
do a bit of editing, which I've always actually quite enjoyed editing. Like I used to, even at school, I would like read over my friends' essays and stuff because I just seem to have a like kind of knack for it.
Yeah.
So I do a bit of that. I do a bit of like reporting, but I don't because I'm like an editor rather than a reporter. I don't really have kind of strict story targets.
Hmm.
Um, and then yeah, thirdly, like I can kind of bring my like policy experience to help kind of shape the coverage more broadly.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I feel super lucky where I've ended up,
Hmm.
and like very conscious as well that like if I didn't land this role, I'm not sure like where I would have been. I'm not sure I would have found somewhere that like feels quite so made for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
I
I
mean,
guess like yeah.
you definitely sound very qualified for this. I mean, I think definitely if it was someone like me or whoever, like been very out of our depth. I mean, it sounds almost tailor made to your prior experience, and yeah, I mean, what it sounds like, you seem to be thriving, and I mean, well, obviously that's no surprise, but yeah, it sounds like you're doing really well. So I guess congrats from everything like that.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I mean, I don't. it's still early days. I hope I'm doing well. I think it, despite everything I said, it definitely took some getting used to, and I'm still getting used to it. And the first few days, I had like massive imposter syndrome. I was like, thinking, oh my God, like, I've been brought in as a deputy editor, and I've never like had a full-time role at a news publication before. Like, I'm gonna get found out. I'm just such a fraud, all that. But they like, people seem to genuinely value my experience, and like, yeah. So it's given me a bit of encouragement. But yeah, I'm definitely still like getting used to things, like just how quick the like experienced reporters can turn things around, and like, the other editors that I work with, like just how sharp they are and stuff. Like, definitely still catching up, for sure.
Absolutely. And I suppose that's a cool thing as well about having done the course, because obviously not everyone who is with us can say this, but certainly you and I, like, we did it, we're in, we've accomplished something. Oh, that sounds kind of like harsh to say, but we've managed to take that next step, which unfortunately, as a recording, everyone who was on it with us has managed to do as of yet. But I mean, it kind of makes those 6 months worthwhile. And obviously, I don't know about you, certainly have laid the groundwork to move into this as a career.
Yeah, it's true. It's yeah, it's a good feeling to know that, like, we worked hard on that course, didn't we? Like, it's good to know that it was worthwhile. And yeah, man, it seems like you're thriving as well. Like, you're doing tons of articles, and getting really good feedback on LinkedIn and stuff. And yeah, I'm glad to know that you feel like it was worth it as well.
Yeah, and it's definitely interesting coming out of it, and then suddenly being faced with like scenarios where, oh, we did this on the course and there was a lot less pressure because it wasn't real people. But now it's like, oh, actually there's a risk here of doing something wrong because this is a real situation, to kind of apply the thinking from the fake scenario and use it in real life. And it's like, wow, like this is it kind of makes it feel, well, yeah, real. That's the word to use. But yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, whether you've been faced with like a similar thing where, oh, well, we kind of did something like this in theory, and now I'm faced with it in reality. Have you had that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, in lots of areas, definitely, like around kind of story structure and use of quotes. I think was like a really
That's a good one.
important one, and also the law stuff, actually. I found that, like, although everyone else has like been doing this at my job, been doing it for longer than I have. Actually, the one advantage is, like, some of that stuff is much fresher in my mind than it is for them. So, like, particularly on the law, I was like correct. I was able to like correct colleagues even on like one of the first days. I was like, that someone was saying something about something around defamation, and I was correcting them because they had gotten the law wrong, and I was like,
okay, yeah,
I was like, I hate to say it, like,
yeah.
not to
Well,
sound like a
actually,
smartass,
yeah.
but actually, I think you're wrong. I was like, I know this because I was studying for my exam.
Yeah. No, I mean, even day one at my job, there was a conversation of whether something was absolute or qualified privilege. And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's mad that, like, I've been hearing those phrases tossed around for months, and now here's an
yeah,
actual situation. I mean, I don't think I found out which one it was, but I mean,
yeah,
it's still wild to hear that conversation in real life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think actually it was the same. I think it was the same issue that uh, I came across. I was correcting someone on.
Mm.
Yeah, well, pesky qualified and absolute privilege.
Yeah, I'm not sure about you, but I know that this time a year ago, I would have, I think, just done the interview to do the course. So I think I probably knew I would be doing it later in the year. So I was wondering if you, this time a year ago, like, did you know yet you were doing the course, or like, kind of like, what would you tell yourself a year ago about what's to come? That kind of thing.
Uh, I think it came a little bit later for me. So I think around a year ago today, I would have been still like quite unsure about what to do. So
Mm.
I had left the treasury by then, and I was kind of taking some time off, spending time in Italy where I have family, and
Very nice.
I was, yeah, kind of mulling over lots of ideas. I think I was kind of looking into the course at this point, but also toying with some other ideas. Um, but yeah, at some point, kind of last summer, I interviewed for the course that we did
Mm.
and one other course, kind of similar one.
Yeah, yeah, we've discussed this, I think, in person. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then I kind of left it quite late to like fully commit.
Mm.
Um, it wasn't until like a few weeks before the course
Oh,
because
okay.
I just felt like so, I wanted to do it, but I felt so nervous, and I was like, hearing all these scare stories about, uh, job cuts in journalism and
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
and I was
yeah,
like, oh my
yeah.
God, is this a bad idea? But basically, yeah, like friends and family kind of convinced me because
Mm.
they knew that it was like what I had wanted to do for a while. So
Yeah. No, I mean, only myself and one other person, I think, seem to remember this, where like we're meant to start in mid-August originally. That was the date I was originally given, something like August
yeah,
15th. And then it got pushed back. We ended up starting at the start of September. And obviously that first week we had, obviously, I think the day when most of us started, Liz Truss became prime minister, and then the week
yeah,
ended with the death of the Queen. So like
yeah,
talk about a week to start, your career in journalism or your entry into journalism. That was, I mean, as I'm sure you remember, that was a really hectic, well, first week.
yeah, yeah. God, yeah, that it's hard to like believe that those things actually happened, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
it feels like uh I don't know, it all felt so like surreal. Um yeah. Now and here we are with like a new monarch and a new
mm,
prime minister,
yeah,
whole new world.
whole new world indeed. I suppose just kind of as a last note to maybe ask, like obviously people who might be listening or watching this might be wanting to find more of your like maybe some of your work that's out there or find out more about you. Like where can people find you online if they want to, keep up to date with what Joe Bambridge is up to?
Yeah, well I mean you can find me on Twitter. It's Joe Bambridge 1 is my Twitter handle. I'm not great at kind of promoting myself or even
Mm,
kind of tweeting, to be honest, but I'm trying to get better because uh, I know it is, important to promote our
yeah.
work. And yeah, I'm hoping to have more um, articles on Politico as well. Unfortunately, a lot of what we do is paywalled, um, but we do uh, kind of bring the paywall down occasionally, and I'm hoping to have some stories there. And yeah, you can. I think on my Twitter you can also find my previous stuff. I
Mm.
wrote a few pieces when I was at the FT, where
Oh
I did.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, well, for sure. And obviously, thank you again, Joe, for taking the time today to have a chat. I mean, a really, really great first person, I think, to have on this. And hopefully, maybe people might take something from this conversation, or who knows, maybe this will be something fun to look back on years from now. This is when Joe was just starting out. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure either way, like you'll go on to do great things. And yeah, just thanks for having this conversation. I really appreciate it.
yeah. Thanks, man. That's super kind of you to say. I hope. Yeah, I hope I do look back on this and I don't think, oh my God, everything's changed. Actually, it
Mm,
was a terrible idea.
yeah.
I'm sure that's not the case. But yeah, um, been been really nice to chat with you. So thanks for having me.